If you just squatted, we use this term arbitrarily, if you squatted normally, probably going to squat more than if you're tempoing it as slow as possible. Kind of want to still be able to kind of have that ability to kind of trust your body to lock in and go into that position.
Can I ask, this is a little bit more of a question really just for me. Do you do anything velocity based? And I don't just mean like VBT training, but like, although I assume most don't, what I really mean by that is, do you do anything where you intentionally want to manipulate the tempos of the lifts?
I used to do a lot of like the old stuff, compensatory acceleration training, if you're familiar with that. That's
Yeah,
how I
of
used to
course.
kind of pretty much train a lot on all three of the lifts. But now it's a little bit different now. I mean, I kind of still do that, but like I guess naturally now because I've done it so much over the years. That's probably one of the biggest things. Like, and definitely I'll control the tempo of like a squat or a bench press. Just because if I don't, it can throw technique off, and you lose pounds. And if you focus too much on speed, you might sacrifice top end numbers for that. You still want speed; it's still part of the equation. My friend and I were talking about this yesterday. If you over focus on that area and you don't necessarily find a good balance, you're probably going to lose pounds off your top end. Because your technique and some other stuff will get affected. So yeah, like when I squat and deadlift or squat and bench, I generally control the tempo. Like as I'm descending into the hole, I get stacked, very well. Then I maintain positioning and integrity into the hole and like my composure, and it helps me squat better and squat more weight rather than like dive bombing it, which I see some people do, and I've never been a fan of it.
Well,
Then
that's actually kind of why I asked, because people sometimes have different movement strategies for like overcoming the same lift under the same rule set, and some people have like a much more muscular based strategy. Obviously, muscles important anyway, but like some people really want the muscle to kind of be a winching system and control the movement the whole way. I do like tempo lifts for teaching people to kind of do that. Some people really like to seize the stretch reflex, and they do a lot better with that. Usually, it's not the best powerlifters, but some people lift very well doing that. Like Olympic lifters. Part of the reason why I thought of it also is because Olympic lifting, obviously it's a different challenge with the bar, but
mhm.
it's a little bit more elastic. And so we've actually been using plyometrics with Olympic lifters, and we'll use some weird ones where you're almost squat jumping, but like staying in a squat. Found that those are both therapeutic to a lot of people, and giving them something that's low weight, but focusing on maximum speed and elasticity, it funnily enough has improved their max lifts a lot. I don't know if it's always as 100% applicable to powerlifters, but I'm starting to experiment more with it having a place in some people's training, because some people seem to have trouble once they're reversing the weight. That's where their knees tend to really ache,
Mhm.
and it's the tendon. So I found that some deep plyos like that seem to give them a little bit of confidence using that stretch reflex, and also be a little bit therapeutic to the passive tissues so they can actually handle it. And their totals go up just because that was a limiting factor for them. It seems to
Yeah.
apply a little bit more to Olympic lifters and powerlifters in my experience right now. It's just something I've been thinking about lately that I was
I,
interested on your insight on.
Yeah, I think it can work with powerlifters. I think plyometrics are actually great for powerlifters as well, just for kind of the reasons that you're talking about. Because right, because I mean, when you're in a competition, you don't want to, like I said, there's kind of a balance. You don't want to absolutely, just tempo all of your lifts either, because then if you just squatted, we use this term arbitrarily. If you squatted normally, probably going to squat more than if you're tempoing it as slow as possible. Kind of want to still be able to kind of have that ability to kind of trust your body to lock in and go into that position without having to consciously think about it every step of the lift. Plyometrics are helpful in that regard for powerlifters as well as weightlifters. But I could see it definitely being highly applicable to Olympic weightlifters given the nature sort of what they do. Maybe when they're first getting into lifting, I think tempos are also like kind of, you alluded to this earlier, for teaching the movement and becoming like sort of proficient in it. It's kind of like learning how to, ride a bike all over the place at first, but eventually procedural memory sort of kicks in and you're just kind of able to do it like second nature. And once you're at that point, then, those other things kind of matter, right? Like you don't have to tempo every single lift. But for me, in my personal experience, like I don't necessarily tempo my squats, but I definitely descend pretty controlled because I'm comfortable getting into that position quickly and getting out. But it's like when you're doing it with so much weight, 800 pounds for reps, I just, I don't want
Yeah.
something to go wrong and then it's over.
Yeah, it's a different story. It's a different
Yeah.
animal.
But I think for most people, generally speaking, because most people aren't ever going to squat 800 pounds, and there's really no functional need to, I think, for most people. At that rate, yeah, I would agree with you and say that playing with plyometrics, especially perhaps even on the days where you aren't necessarily doing your lifts, like if you're lifting heavy, like squat and deadlift 2 or 3 days a week, the other days if you're doing plyometrics and kind of getting that training and creating more awareness with your body, I think that I haven't seen it hurt anyone. I see it usually as more helpful than hurtful, and that's another thing. When I was in our, I did a lot of plyometrics in ROTC, in college before I commissioned. My squats and deadlifts went so well, and they became so intuitive to me. I think that might have had something to do with it.
That reminds me of a question I wanted to ask earlier. Do you feel like there was anything you did in your PT that was a net positive? What was net positive of like, okay, like this was a good, really good thing to do, and what was like detracting from the overall powerlifting objectives?
If we did like calisthenic heavy days, those were actually really helpful for like squat and deadlift, especially. But it was kind of like doing plyometrics a lot of the time, like, or you would do plyometric, like, movements, like some of the more well-known ones. That was actually super helpful. The Army also has this thing, and they look silly, but they're actually really, really well researched and helpful. They have like a warm-up system where you're doing kind of different movements. I think those are actually really, really good too, and are super undervalued. But it's kind of funny how we do them, like cadence and stuff like that's a little weird. But if you're just using those movements, I think they're actually particularly useful. With like pull-ups and stuff like that, I think are really useful. And there's also a lot of calisthenics that we do where you have to use your core to kind of like stabilize your body to a pretty high extent. I think that's also helpful, and it reinforces kind of bracing. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely things I think that can carry over in a positive way, and it's not just all doom and gloom with PT to lifting.
Hybrid, one thing Ashton does that he still brings with him is this man's always doing pull-ups, just doing pull-ups constantly.
I usually do them like 5 to 7 days a week.
Yeah, that's your fourth lift.
Yeah. Yeah, right now 7 days. I do them every day.
It's a military thing in my experience.
Yeah.
They always need to be able to bang out the pull-ups, and it's always high frequency just because that's the mill life.
Yeah. And that's what I mean, with pull-ups, honestly, like I know for a fact doing pull-ups every day has never taken away from my lifting. Why can I really say that? But I highly doubt that it's taken away from my lifting. I'll put it that way.
It's not a lift that necessarily directly interfering with any of the prime movers.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and it's also probably, I think, actually I would wager that that's a net positive as well in terms of supplementing them, because the one thing that probably isn't being directly worked is upper body pulling.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the way that it works with the scapula and the upper back, it's probably just keeping your shoulders more prepared for bench press anyway.
Yeah.
So it's probably more than just something that wasn't interfering. I bet you on some level it's been a positive.
Oh, I have no doubt. I'd be inclined to agree with what you're saying.
I mean, I would say that even though lats aren't directly involved with any of the three lifts, bigger lats and stronger lats benefits all three lifts, and like a different reason for each lift.
Yeah, no doubt. I've even found like upper body and like my upper back is bigger. Like when I squat, it's almost like it's kind of a small thing, and it's probably not like super intuitive, but it also is at the same time, I guess. When I'm like setting up to squat and I have the bar on my back, for instance, like because I have a broader upper body, I have more surface space for the bar to sit on, and I can like stabilize more weight better now, like being lighter.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The mechanics are more comfortable for me squatting now than they were when I was like 180.
Well, with the pull-up too, you're really getting your torso and thorax like pulling into a position similar to where you are when you're racking the bar on your back anyway. There's some people that really suffer in terms of shoulder mobility on this squat. I do find that at least a wide grip pull-up for some people doesn't have to be behind the back, but like for some people, I have found just being able to expose themselves to that. We'll usually do like 2 or 3 times a week. If you're doing 6, 7 days a week, it's just like, that's nothing for you. You're like, my shoulders are able to protract into this position with my hands out wide pretty easily. Because you're exposed to it so much.
I always have people tell me, that they struggle with a low bar position and bench pressing heavy. In 13 years, I've never had that problem.
Yeah. Interesting. It's a good anecdote, you know what I mean, as a case study.
Yeah. I agree.
There's 3 kinds of squats. There's the high bar, the low bar, and then the third one, Ashton's. You just set it on the lat.
Yeah.
Just put it on your back and go.
I don't know if y'all have ever tried that, but I remember I used to try extra low bar where I tried to get down as low as I possibly could. It was iffy holding it, but the squats actually felt fantastic.
I could never feel secure like that.
Oh, you won't. Like that's why I could never bring it to like a competition.
You might lift more weight, but you'll never feel secure doing it.
Yeah. And like the risk of it's too high because that thing starts sliding, it's game over.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's over for you, for the shoulders. They're gone.
Depending on the rules of the meet, like if in the rule book, and it's like sometimes it's vague or left to interpretation, but if they say, oh, the lifter needs to stand erect with their knees locked, they might not consider that to be standing erect.
Yeah, makes sense.
True. That's true.
So they might call you on it in some federations.
That's why we like to compete in the knockoff feds, so we can get away with what we want.
Yeah, just go have fun. Be reckless. Do it.
It's funny. Yeah, there's so many feds where they just let stuff fly, and you watch the video, and you're like, that should not be a thing. Why is that a thing?
Yeah. Some federations, I mean, some have some meets that are fine, but sometimes some of the numbers I take with a grain of salt. Because I'm like, I'm like, do they really do that? Like, to like a true, but I mean, it depends. I kind of like to see the lift too,
Yeah.
to be kind of
Yeah.
like make a determination.